Hello and welcome to Archive West Texas. I'm your host, Gordon Wilkerson, joined today by our producer, Rachel Boyd. On this program, we visit with the people who have helped shape the history, culture, business, and character of West Texas. We talk about their stories, celebrate their accomplishments, and seek inspiration from the lessons they've learned along the way. Today, we begin a special three-part conversation with Marc McDougal and his mother, Carolyn. The McDougal name has become synonymous with real estate development, community leadership, and civic engagement in Lubbock. Much of that story begins with Marc's parents, Delbert and Carolyn McDougal, whose vision, determination, and commitment to service helped transform both a family business and the community that they loved. Marc, Carolyn, welcome to Archive West Texas.
Thanks for having us.
Carolyn, let's start with you. Tell us how the McDougals got to Texas. Tell us about your family and how this started.
Well, actually, Delbert and I are from the area. I graduated from Levelland High School, and he graduated from Smyre. And we met in 1954 at church in Levelland, and we're married in 1961. Delbert was working in El Paso at the time. So we were there from 1961 until 1966. Both of our boys were born, and we moved back to Lubbock.
And then mom's grandmother, be my great-grandmother, started the Gage Gin in Whitehall, Texas. So that's kind of how mom's side of the family got out here they came here from Arkansas. And
cotton business.
And
What about the McDougal side? What did your grandparents do?
Dad was born in the house that's still out there at Smyre and lived there. Matter of fact, my grandparents lived in that same house until they were in their 80s, and Dad moved them to Lubbock for health reasons. My granddad worked on the railroad, and so that's how he got to Smyre. And then he was a mechanic and had his own little mechanic shop there. My grandmother ran the post office until she moved to Lubbock in about 89 or 90 maybe. I'm sure there's some really good stories about Dad's high school years still running around somewhere in Smyre.
You know, I would commend to our listeners a book that Tony Privet put together, which is basically the McDougal family story called Failure's Not an Option. Where can the listeners get a copy of that?
I believe that's on Amazon, or they can call our office. We still have several cases of them, so welcome to call the office and get one for free.
It's got a more detailed description of the whole story than we're going to be able to talk about in these programs. But
right, and that gets really deep into Overton and all that as well.
Yeah. So you're out in El Paso, and Delbert is working for General Electric.
Yes.
How did he get that job, and what did that teach him about business, and how did that?
He actually started with General Electric in Lubbock. He was out in the warehouse, still rolling appliances around. After that, he was transferred pretty quickly to El Paso. He definitely had a work ethic, and he was transferred to Dallas. And then after a couple of years, he was transferred to El Paso. Then GE moved us to Lubbock, and we had been here about 3 or 4 years. And he had an opportunity. General Electric wanted to move him to the East Coast to their corporate office.
Hartford, Connecticut.
And I thought he should go because, if you mess with big corporations, sometimes the opportunity doesn't come again. But he decided no. We had really started in the apartment business at the time, had a couple of apartments, and he said our parents both were elderly, living in the area. He didn't want to leave them, and he said Lubbock is a great place to raise our boys. So he left General Electric when he was 45. He just decided we'd stay in Lubbock.
What do you think when your husband left a good job with General Electric to become an apartment owner?
And the month after he left, interest rates went to 24%.
Yes.
Yeah, we talk about how high interest rates are today at, 6-7%.
Yeah.
Marc and I might be showing our age, but you graduate from college in 1982 when prime is at 22%.
Yeah, exactly.
And your real estate professors tell you guys will never borrow money on a fixed rate mortgage because the S&L industry is gone because of that, and nobody'd be that dumb. I don't know. It was a different day and age.
It was, and we had 2 boys one that was graduating from high school and one that was 2 years behind. And I was like, oh my gosh, how are we going to pay our bills?
I'll tell you a funny story about that. So Dad left GE in 1982. I graduated high school in 82, and we went on a cruise. And we were sitting there, and if you've been on a cruise, they put you with other folks, and there were two other couples sitting over there. And after a couple of nights at dinner, they looked over and said, all right, we have a bet. Are you a doctor or are you a lawyer? And they were talking to Dad. And I looked up and I said, he's neither. He's unemployed. Because he had just left and hadn't started. Back then it was called Brinkcraft Development. But yeah, he was actually unemployed on that trip.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't last long.
No, and then you talked about the S&Ls. So shortly after, not long after Dad left GE is when the savings loan crisis hit and RTC took over. And that's really where Dad got his big start with buying apartments, because he bought. I'm not sure there's a apartment RTC property in Lubbock that Dad did not buy. He got the reputation that he would close and would do what he said he would do. And RTC came straight to him on every deal in Lubbock, and then deals as far as Houston. We had some properties that we got from RTC down there as well.
It was a crazy time. It was a good time to buy. Mark, what do you think made your parents such an effective team?
Work ethic. When they bought their first apartment that, oddly enough, we just sold in December of last year down in South Overton. And that was in 68, I think it was.
We bought that in
late 60s, early 70s. But by 82, they had acquired probably around 1,000 units, mostly in North Overton. Mom was running all those during the day because Dad was working at GE. And at night, we'd have dinner at home, and then it was a family event every night of the week, and all day on Saturday, go mow yards, clean toilets. We did make-readies. We were the maintenance, the cleaning, leasing. So Mom ran all of that, even after Dad retired from GE and started the family business full-time. But Mom was still on the properties until we sold them in 2018. They just made a great team. Now, I don't know what happened at home at night when I wasn't there. Maybe she wants to tell you about that. I have no clue. But I don't ever remember any arguments about work or money or any of that.
So when Delbert left GE and started in the family business full time, how many units, how many apartments, what was the size of the company at that point in time?
Everything was in, with the exception of two properties, everything was in North Overton. There were two in South Overton. There was probably close to 800 units, 600 to 800.
Mm-hmm.
Good size start.
And then we made a decision sometime in the early 90s that we were going to sell everything that was built prior to 1978, get rid of the asbestos and all those issues. So we sold almost everything that we had in South Overton. And then, of course, 10 years later, Dad has this really bright idea to buy everything and tear it down. So we'd sold them all, then we had to go buy them back. I think we only had a couple on 10th Street and maybe one on 7th Street that we had not sold.
In the break, we're talking about a stolen school bus. We got to go there. Who wants to tell that story?
Well, it wasn't me, I can tell you that. So Dad was in Smyre at football practice, and I guess the field was somewhere away from school. And I don't know what he did, but he was told to go get on the bus and kicked out of practice. So he went and got on the bus and fired it up and drove back to school and walked home and left the team a couple miles away. I think today they'd probably kick you out of school and throw you in prison. Mom gets that story confused, as she did during the break, and says, I did that. It wasn't me, it was Dad. Statute of limitations have passed, so we're good. Oh, there's lots of stories about him growing up.
Oh, yes.
So back to the family business. You started with about 800 units in North and South Overton. Basically, one or two employees? Tell us how the company grew and what your first 10 years in the business were like.
Well, basically that first 10 years, because I came in January of 83, Dad put me down in North Overton running an apartment actually where the gas pumps are at Walmart today. Mom was down there as well. But the RTC, we started buying those properties and renovating those. So Once we started doing that, we started a construction company. And then sometime during that time frame, I think it was 1988, we decided to buy a real estate company because we could get commissions on buying, use that money for rehabs. And so we went and bought Med Hunt Real Estate. About a month later, we merged that with Margaret Williams Realtors. And I think for a time we operated that as Med Hunt Margaret Williams Realtors. And then sometime in the early 90s, we moved over to McDougal Realtors. So that's kind of how we got in the brokerage business because of buying. And then also the construction business. And then in the early 90s, Dad had built several properties in Lubbock and Dallas, San Angelo, Abilene. I may be missing a few, Big Springs, prior to that. But now that we had a construction company, we built Dominion, Ashton Point, all the properties we were buying, we were redoing ourselves. And then we got into, at the time, we were just doing work for ourselves. We also started a single family operation. So it just, we would take the construction company. Initially, we bought it for our use. And then later years, we did a lot of third-party construction, just contractor work.
So a decade in, you had 20 or 30 brokers or realtors.
Yeah, at one time we had about 45 agents. Today we've got about 20.
And then construction company, you had property managers at that point?
We had when we sold the apartments in 2018, that's about the same time that we shut down the construction company as well. I think we had 334 employees, and when we sold in April of 18, we went down to about 34 pretty quick. Most of them stayed with the apartments.
What convinced you to join the family business?
Well, I got kicked out of college, and Dad didn't give me an option. That's the real answer. I enjoyed it. When I first came back in 83, like I said, Dad put me down running an apartment. And when I'm saying running it, you were cleaning apartments, doing make-readies, leasing. We didn't, at the time, it was just us working. There wasn't a whole lot of employees, as I remember. There was 2 or 3 at what we would now call the corporate office where Dad was at. He had a bookkeeper and a office manager. But Dad bought some land out in Horizon West, which is kind of out around Shadow Hills Golf Course off North Frankfort. And that was way outside of town. And I started building single-family houses out there, really enjoyed that. And then we decided to do all of our own in-house maintenance because by then we had 2,000 or 3,000 apartment units. So we had our own carpet trucks, our own make-ready crews, our own plumbing, heating and air technicians. And we didn't do third-party work, just all for ourselves. And it just kind of rolled from there.
On Mark joining the company, I'd like to say he was going to college because I was pushing that. I wanted him to go to college and finish college. And Delbert came home one day and he said, Carolyn, Mark does not like school. He's not attending. He's coming home and going to work. And that's what happened. Yeah, I had
a job at a parts store, and I didn't think you could make any more money than I was making on commission. So I was enrolled at school, but I never went. I'd get up and go to work, and I think they got a letter that I was not invited to come back to South Plains College. So that's when he told me I was moving back to Lubbock. And he didn't give me an option. It wasn't like, well, you've got a job. Do you want to keep that one and pay your own rent? And
right.
He didn't. He just said, you're moving. But matter of fact, he didn't tell me he was moving back. I was at the counter at the parts store, and I looked up, and there was a pickup and a trailer, and I'm like, that looks like my furniture. It looks like my dad's pickup. And he gets out of the truck and walks in and said, I just moved you out of that apartment. If you need a place to stay, you're welcome to come home tonight. That's exactly how that went down. And so as soon as I got off work, I drove probably faster than the speed limit to get home, see what was going on. And then my dinner plate is a letter that I was not invited back to South Plains College.
Carolyn, was there a point in time when, after making the transition from GE to the family business, where you thought, this is going to work, this is okay, I'm glad we're doing this?
Oh, absolutely. When we bought that first little apartment right off of 19th and Avenue R, I loved what I was doing. And as we grew, I loved it. Great employees, great residents. I loved what I was doing. So, and I never doubted that we were going to do well once we could pay our bills.
What did you all bring to your customers? Tell us about the customer service level that you provided, why people wanted to rent a McDougal property.
Well, I think the first thing was probably service. If they had, a commode that didn't work, whatever, we wanted them the minute that service order was turned in, we wanted it done that day. And our employees were willing to do that, and they knew that. Another thing is that we had parties for them around the pool, at Tech, on our Tech property during the end of the semester when they were all having tests. We made lunch for them every day. I mean, it was real simple. It was like Frito pie in a paper sack, things like that. But we fed them, and we got the residents together who got to know each other. And our manager was walking the property most of the time.
Built a sense of community.
I can tell you, growing up in the 70s, lots of nights we would, or Dad or me and Dad, maybe not the whole family, but we would go down to unstop a sink, or it didn't wait till morning. And Mom doesn't know this, but about 2 weeks ago, I got a voicemail at work, which I never get a voicemail. Everything comes in my cell phone now. But it was a resident at an apartment we used to own that we sold in 2018, talking about, is there any way y'all could buy this property back? I've lived here since I was the second tenant to move in, and that was in the 90s, so they'd been there forever, and talked about the service. There was no service anymore. The property had gone down, and wanting us to buy it back. And I had a nice visit with her, but told her I was pretty sure they paid too much for it when they bought it, and I wasn't paying that for it. So, but yeah, it was all service and taking care of tenants, and like she said, having numerous parties by the pool, cooking hot dogs or Frito pie or whatever it was.
Mark, where do you think your father got a sense of civic responsibility?
I don't know that I can answer that. I just know that growing up, some people say they were reared Baptist. I was yanked up Baptist. There was no choice but go to church. Church, work, and give back to industry or community you live in. Now, for a long time, it was industry. Dad was very involved, and probably going back to his days with GE, being involved with associations. That's kind of how he built his business here, through the Home Builders Association, Apartment Association, the Chamber. And then we got into more community stuff with politics. But yeah, that was one thing we were taught early. If you made $1, you gave 10 cents to church on Sunday, you tithed, you went to church. We didn't have a choice in our house but work. It wasn't even an option. If you spent the night with a friend on Friday night, Saturday morning at 7, Dad was picking you up to go to work, and then giving back to the community and the industry you work in.
Carolyn, what was Delbert like at home?
Oh, the best husband a wife could ever have. And I know every wife says that. But at home, I was the boss. And at the office, he was the boss. And we both understood that. But he was just always calm, very giving. I had to be real careful to say, oh, I like that, because he'd come home with it the next day, whatever it was. But he, very loving, good, strong man. At Christmas time, all that, he helped me cook. He helped clean up. He was just a great, loving companion. No temper, just,
He had a
good
temper.
Man. Well,
She just didn't see it.
I didn't see it at home.
What qualities do you think stood out most in his character?
Well, I can tell you one story that I think kind of sums it up. I was maybe in junior high, but I remember it like it was yesterday. We were at dinner. Mom's telling a story about a tenant that was late on rent and wouldn't pay rent. Now, back in those days, you just grabbed their stuff, throw them out. Really wasn't much of an eviction court. You just boot them out. And I don't know what the guy had said to Mom, but he had said something. Dad got up, and it is cold. It's winter, and it's probably in the 20s or teens. And he goes down to an apartment in Overton by himself, and he shows back up, and he doesn't have his coat on. And Mom said, "Did you kick him out?" She says, "Well, they turned his electricity off, and he doesn't have any water, and it's freezing cold, and I just didn't have the heart to kick him out, so I gave him my coat and left and told him we'd talk about rent later." I don't know if the guy ever paid rent.
I don't remember either.
To me, that kind of answers the question you just asked. So, it wasn't always about collecting rent.
True.
That happened many times. The pancake breakfast, he would buy tickets, and Country Village, all of that down there were just working people, and we would pass those out to them.
To every tenant.
Huh?
He bought them for every tenant.
Uh-huh. And because we knew they were getting at least a good breakfast, eat all they wanted to. They could stay and have breakfast and lunch. And so that was another thing.
That was back in the days when it used to be over at the old Coliseum.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you could stay all day, but it also supported the community with the Lions Club as well.
Carolyn, what role did faith play in your marriage?
Oh, big. Yeah. We always trusted the Lord, prayed, went to church, did our best with our boys. Every Sunday morning, Mark was hard to get up. And every Sunday morning we went to church unhappy because I'd been mad at him and we'd argued back and forth. And then we get in the car and we're in a terrible mood. So one Sunday morning, Delbert said, okay, this is it. We don't have the right spirit to go to church. And he told Mark, he said, from now on, we will call you one time. And if you do not get up, we're going on to church without you. Well, the very next Sunday, that happened. Mark didn't get up. He woke up when the house was all quiet. And he knew he was in a lot of trouble with his daddy. So he mowed yards on Saturday. So he had a bicycle, but we lived a long way from church. We went to Oakwood Baptist. So, of course, in our travels, he knew, call a taxi. So he saw how much money he had from his mowing the day before, called a taxi, scared to death, gets in, tells him where to go, and his daddy's waiting on him. And he watches the meter to see how much money he has. When he gets 2 blocks from the church, he also knows that he should tip. So as soon as he gets about 2 blocks from the church, he has the man stop and let him out, and he gives him all of his money, which wasn't a lot. But
A lot to me.
And then he came into church. Well, I mean, there wasn't any punishment because he showed up to Sunday school. And
I was late, but I wasn't real late.
no.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen again.
What do you think Delbert would be most proud of in the Lubbock community that he had a role in? I mean, he had a role in so much.
Well, I mean, obviously, he was really proud of Overton. That was a project that was talked about for at least a decade, was a deterrent to growth at Tech and downtown Lubbock, where we're sitting today. Probably wouldn't be sitting here without Overton. So, he was really, really proud of that. But, he was also one that was really proud of the way Lubbock always rallied around a project, whether it was a 1970 tornado or when we had the hurricanes and we took care of, 700 or 800 people from Louisiana. He was always involved in those projects and just proud of the way Lubbock rallied around an emergency or a problem.
Carolyn, when you think about your and Delbert's legacy, what do you want folks to remember about the McDougal family?
Well, that we cared about Lubbock, and Lubbock cared about us. They helped us along the way a lot. But Lubbock is a wonderful city to live in and to work in. And I just can't say enough about people who supported us, because when we bought that first apartment, it was $10,000 down. We didn't have the $10,000. And one of the bank officers, Coffee Connor, loaned us that money. Now, what Delbert used for collateral, I have no idea, because back then I knew nothing about what collateral was. I learned. But I don't know how he borrowed that $10,000. But Coffee Connor was standing there and helped us purchase that first apartment. And that's the people. That's the people in Lubbock. We love Lubbock, and Delbert was right when he said, we're not moving to Hartford, Connecticut. This is a great place. We're here with our family, and we were here through our parents' life and saw our boys raised here and doing well.
Worked out well.
And all the grandkids and all the great-grandkids are here.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Thank you so much for taking time today to share the story of your family. We're going to continue our conversation next week with Mark talking about his service to the community politically as mayor, as a council member. Thank you for joining us today. Appreciate you listening, and please join us again next week when we have another episode of Archive West Texas.